Don't fuck up. Don't fuck yourself. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Rude Cooking School podcast. I'm your host, John Hauser III, and I am flying solo for this episode. I'm going to go over the history of Pez with you wonderful, wonderful listeners. I don't know about you, but Pez has always held some sort of like weird mystery for me. Like I've always loved it ever since I was like a kid. It always felt special as a candy, you know, even without the like little dispensers, the heads, which always kind of creeped me out. You know, you're kind of like getting candy out of the neck of something. But I always enjoyed it. But like the little candies always were so precious, and the crunch was really satisfying for me, and the flavor always was incredible. I'm also a person who really likes conversation hearts and Necco wafers. So that kind of like crunchy, powdery, like pressed together candy always is oddly satisfying for me. But there's something, and I've had a couple in the last couple of days researching this, you know, for research purposes. And there's a crunch to Pez that's really weird. Like you would think it would fall apart, but it actually does kind of crunch away. But like even as a kid, just having one always felt special, and the tactile nature of the dispenser and like, you know, opening it up and putting all the Pez into the holder and then taking it down. Like I still have some old Pez dispensers from when I was a kid. I kept a few, and I mean, like just as like decoration, which was weird. Like I had a couple around like even my dorm room, you know, and they were like Spider-Man. They were all just Spider-Man. So I have a few still, and they're just Spider-Man heads that I'd collected, or not even collected. I would just see one and buy it as a kid, and I just had a few over the years. And then when Crosby was born, I would buy a few when I would see him when he was old enough to eat candy and shit. So he's got like a bunch of Star Wars ones, like all the Simpsons. I've got like a bunch of them somewhere that are just still in the bags. Like I don't even know why. I just put them in a bag. Like, oh, these are for later, for when he gets older. And then I think I lost them. So I'm sure I'll come around the box and it just be like, oh, here's a bunch of fucking old Pez. Great. Which I'm sure happens to a lot of people. And I'm sure a lot of people have old Pez dispensers in their house or in, you know, in a box somewhere. And it always feels like a thing to hold on to. I don't know why. They're not, you know, well, some of them are particularly expensive now. We'll get into that later. Researching this has been a really weird thing. I've actually been researching this. This was one I've had on the books. I've had the basic outline for almost a year because I just couldn't find any more info. I mean, we'll go over the history of it, but like as far as like fun facts or like really weird stories, there's really not a lot. Kind of everything just regurgitates the same like history points that I'm gonna get into with you guys in a bit. And now with AI, good God, there's so many fucking garbage websites that are like here's the history of Pez, and you start reading, you're like, this reads weird, and it's like, and then there was a Peyton Manning Pez head, and you're like, what? Was there a Peyton Manning Pez head? And then the next headline for the paragraph's like, what happened to Peyton Manning? And you're like, huh? And it's like, Peyton Manning was a football player who played in Tennessee. And you're like, what the fuck is happening? And then the next paragraph's like, Peyton Manning's career in Tennessee. Then he became a Pez person who lived in Indianapolis. And you're like, oh, okay. This is just written by AI, and somebody's just, you know, they just set it up for fucking clicks, and just, this is what the internet's going to be, guys. Like, people are just using it to fucking create fake content for you to click on it and then they get money from weird advertisers that have those crazy like pictures of like, here's your skin with a bunch of holes in it, and here's boobs on the fucking back of a giraffe, and whatever the fuck. But yeah, researching this has been a really interesting endeavor, and the Pez website's helpful, and like as far as some of their history, but not a lot going on. It's really strange for such an iconic candy not to be as thoroughly documented as I figured it would be by this point. I mean, Pez has been going strong for almost 100 years. So let's get into it. Our main source for the episode is an article by Teresa Matchimer from Smithsonian Magazine. So shout out to her. She was very helpful. And then I'm going to go through the history, and then we'll do a couple like really fun, kind of just like really goofy things I found just about Pez in general, which I'm like, man, I wish this was happening now, but it's not, just in terms of like flavors and shit. But and then we'll go over a couple of really expensive Pez things that were sold. And number one's going to fuck you. You're just going to be like, Jesus Christ. Because when I found this out, I was like, you gotta be shitting me. So I hope you stick around with me, and let's get into it. By the way, thank you for listening to the Root Cooking School podcast. I really appreciate it. So when it comes to stocking stuffers, one product hits the perfect harmony. The Pez dispenser. Part character, part candy, and very collectible, the trinket has delighted kids and collectors around the world for decades. And yet, when the Austrian confectioner Edward Haas III invented Pez, he set out to corner an entirely different market. One of the other things I was going to do was try to get this together right before Christmas, and then me and Jenny wound up having the episode about just Christmas stuff. So, because one thing that I would always get Pez dispensers for stocking stuffers. They're really perfect. They just come with a thing, and then you get a bunch of candy. Voila, you're good to go. And then you're just stuffing sugar into your mouth all day. And it's really fun. I remember getting a Yoda stocking stuffer once and being so fucking hyped on that. That was, I was a kid. So it was fucking, 40 years ago or whatever it was. But, I remember that being really cool and just being like, they make Star Wars ones, because when I was a kid, they were just kind of really generic. They weren't so, I guess, licensed out as much. So some of them were really generic. It's like, here's a fucking donkey, or no, we'll get to that guy later. But like animals or clowns or witches or ghosts, which were always really fun. But very generic, and not, like, here's your favorite thing that you watch as a kid. Now that's, it's all Disney shit and, themed and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, by the 1920s, Edward Haas III had already owned a successful baking goods business in Austria that he had inherited from his father, Edward Haas II. He founded the Edward Haas Company in 1894 to sell baking powder invented by his father, Edward Haas I. So Pez is basically a giant Nepo baby project, is what we're saying here, says the man whose last name has the third on it. So Edward Haas I invented his own version of baking powder that was really successful and sold a lot, and other things as well, a lot of baked good stuff. Edward Haas III took over the management of the company when he turned 18. That's crazy. Of course, it's the 1920s. So he created the first newspaper advertisements for the company for their pre-measured cake mix, which at the time, this stuff was just starting to become a convenience thing, because making cakes took all day, or, was kind of, there was a mystique around baking, and, having the right ingredients. And, a lot of people couldn't just go and buy a fucking big thing of flour or didn't bake enough to warrant spending the money on baking powder and baking soda and a big bag of sugar and, all that kind of stuff. So pre-measured cake mixes were pretty sweet at the time, in terms of convenience. But I was trying to think of like how they did it back then. Like it had to have been by hand. I can't imagine it was automated yet. So it's pretty fucking cool. I would like to find out. Like I couldn't really find too much on it, but they would have like boxes and stuff. But I would like to know how the process was. The success of the Haas baking powder inspired the young businessman to pursue his interest in the confectionery world. An anti-smoking advocate, Haas III wanted to create a tablet that would, quote, not only refresh one's breath, but could help consumers who were anxious to cut down on smoking or overeating, end quote. Writes Sean Peterson, company historian at the Pez Candy Incorporated. Strong peppermint flavor seemed to be just the trick, but peppermint oil back then was expensive and primarily used in pharmaceuticals. Peppermint flavored product were usually made by boiling ingredients, which wasted peppermint flavoring because it evaporated in the heat. So Haas company chemists developed a tablet manufacturing process that was cold. Pez tablets are made by compressing confectionery sugar and flavoring with I think it's 3,000 pounds of force until each brick holds together. The candies didn't originally come in dispensers, but were instead packaged in metal tins or foil paper wrapping. So like Altoids, they came in like little tins and they would just have all the bricks in the tins, which actually sounds really cool. And the first advertisements for Pez were Supermint Pez, and there's like a little package in foil, and it's very similar to the Pez packaging that we have now. It's wrapped in foil, and then there's a wrapper around that, and then above it is just like a giant burning cigarette with a red X through it. It's pretty cool looking. It's very stark. Very 1920s, Eastern European artwork. It's pretty cool. Before he could sell the product, Haas needed a name, something snappy and universal. He took the first, middle, and last letters from the word for peppermint in German, Pfefferminz, and created Pez. That's pretty cool. Because Pfefferminz doesn't sound great. Well, I mean, to call your product just peppermint would be stupid anyway, but Pez is cool. It's, Pez. It definitely sounds like a website that would, if they hadn't created Pez, there'd be a website that would, fizzle out some fucking shitty social media, come and do a Svants at Pez, come to Pez.com where we can just do Pfeffermints and, instead of skeets or fucking tweets and shit, it's do a Fez. So whatever. The first Pez candies, called Pez Drops, were marketed as a luxury item for adults. Advertisements touted health benefits and showed couples about to kiss with the caption, quote, deliciously fresh breath, end quote. Early ads proclaimed, no smoking, Pezzing allowed. Later, the Ed Haas company hired young women to drive around to crowded locations in Pez-branded trucks wearing Pez uniforms and stand near busy squares and major events to hand out free samples of peppermint treats. Already Pezzing, the pinup girls asked in ads. The women, called Pez girls, would arrive at famous landmarks around the world, offering the public a new way to freshen their breath and refrain from smoking. There's a picture of these Pez girls in these pretty weird. Well, they're not weird. They're just dresses that have the word Pez, and there's two different kind of dresses. One has a big white collar, but they both have those old timey movie usher hats that are round, and they're kind of upside down cake pans, but they're giving them out to kids at a movie theater. But it's a really weird picture because there's two sets of twins in front of the two Pez girls who don't look like twins. It's really weird. Pez's popularity required Haas's company to convert factories from baking powder and other production to more of peppermints. Uh, Mechanized tablet forming processes pushed Pez to change course in the 1930s from round tablets to their now familiar rectangular ones. So in the beginning, they were round like Altoids, and then they changed to the rectangular brick ones, which are really cool. Like, they're almost like they weirdly remind me of Lego, even though they're not at all. But I really like the shape of them and the way they look. So Pez tablets spent more than 20 years without a handy carrying container. The metal tin or paper rolls were meant to be carried in one's pocket. But in the late 1940s, Haas realized the customers wanted a quick way to pick out a tablet with one hand, or to share with a friend without dirtying the candies in the tin. Haas hired engineer Oscar Uxa to create a solution. And in 1949, the first Pez dispensers were sold at the Vienna Trade Fair. The U.S. patent was granted in 1952. So the first Pez dispensers look more like cigarette lighters than the Pez dispensers we recognize today. And USA, it's UXA, so I'm assuming it's like Uha or USA, had filed a patent in 1934 for a self-closing one-handed lighter, which is pretty cool. But the engineer probably based the Pez dispenser design on the size of a packet of Pez tablets and made it handheld and slim enough to fit in your pocket or, your suit jacket or, to conveniently put in your purse. And this was interesting because from the picture, I was like, oh, wow, it's metal. But even from the beginning, Pez dispensers were made out of plastic. The original Pez dispenser, imagine the Pez dispenser you know and love today without the feet. Those didn't come until the 80s. But then there's no head. It's just got like a rounded top with like a little sawtooth thing at the top that you can hook your finger on, and just kind of flick, and then it would, just immediately come out, and you have Pez. So it was already there. Like, that dude had the whole thing done from the beginning. And basically nothing has changed from this design, which is pretty fucking cool. The only thing they've really done was add the feet in the 80s and then add the heads, which we'll get into. Plastic molding had been around since the 1800s. But plastic production really took off after World War II. Raw materials are turned into specific shapes through a number of methods: casting, cutting, forming, and injection molding. Pez fashioned their dispensers with the latter. Quote, casting is as old as the hills. You take the hot metal and you pour it in a mold, and it's solid. Injection molding is like casting, except under more pressure. Instead of taking a ladle of hot material and pouring it in a mold and letting gravity do the work, you take a hot material and you push it into the mold. That allows you to make it much thinner and have a lot more detail, end quote. The first Pez dispensers, which are now called regulars, were such a success in Europe that the Haas company needed to construct a second factory in Austria to keep up with demand. Ads showed off the convenience of a one-handed dispenser, and that was easy to use while driving and easy to share with others. Haas turned his attention to the American market, but there, Pez's meteoric rise came to a screeching halt. There just wasn't much interest in Americans quitting smoking. Surprise! And Pez needed to pivot fast. Also, I guess at the time they thought that, I'm not eating candy, I'm an adult. But, I honestly, I don't know. Back then there was, I guess, Wrigley's gum was a good breath freshener. So it just never reached the market, and they couldn't figure it out. But then this was their solution: to change the tablet's flavor from minty to fruity and start marketing to children. In 1955, at the urging of the vice president of U.S. operations, Curtis Alina, Pez introduced its first character-shaped dispensers, a robot and Santa Claus. Today, Santa Claus is still Pez's best-selling design. You know, not those. I mean, those old ones were really cool, but every year it's usually Santa Claus because everybody gets them in their stocking. Different from the modern dispensers, the first character Pez dispensers had full-body designs with a full red suit for Santa Claus and the all-metal looking nuts and bolts for the robot. In 1956, Pez released a space gun-shaped dispenser that shot fruit-flavored tablets. The complex dispensers were expensive to manufacture. At 5 times the normal cost of a normal candy bar, unsurprisingly, they sold poorly. The Santa's really cool. Like, it's a red and white Santa. He's got black boots. He's got the word Pez on his chest. It's like, part of the injection molding. Santa's face kind of looks like a skeleton almost. He kind of looks like that creepy puppet with the knife hands from Puppet Master, kind of. Because that's where his face would kind of open up and the Pez would come out, right where his mouth and his beard hit. But I mean, I can imagine, like, in the 50s, like, that would probably be the fucking coolest when you're a kid. Shit, if you gave me one of those when I was a kid, I'd probably think it was the coolest. But I have seen the guns, and they're really cool. And apparently they did shoot out. And it was the 50s, so it was like the atomic age, and they called it the Pez space gun. Shoots delicious Pez candy bullets. Somebody's gonna lose an eye there. But so the price includes, so it was 49 cents for the gun, and it was fully, the gun was loaded with Pez, and it says the price includes genuine Pez space gun permit. So you got a little permit for the gun, which, good for them. But 49 cents back in 1956, probably, I don't know, that's what, like $8,500 in 2025 money, I think. So kids probably couldn't spend that, I guess. Quote, the Santa and the robot dispensers had internal parts and glue seams and used a lot of plastic. Space gun assembly was labor intensive and also used a lot of expensive plastic. Assembly would have to be mechanized, and then the cost to manufacture would need to be reduced, end quote. So they just adjusted again and pivoted, realizing they were bleeding money from making all this stuff, even though the robot and the Santa were hitting at the time. Like, kids were like, holy shit, this is cool. And if they could afford it, would get the gun because that was just the fucking coolest. But they created a new toy-like dispenser that struck a balance between the original regulars, the ones without the head, and the character designs. A character head on top and a rectangular body held on to the candy underneath. The first Pez dispenser with this anatomy was a witch introduced at Halloween in 1957. And the next year, the company struck gold with its first license deal for a Popeye dispenser. Popeye the Sailor Man, who is now in, the public domain, and anybody can do anything with Popeye. So naturally, the first thing they do is make a fucking terrible horror movie out of it, because that's what everybody does with these public domain things now. It's a rite of passage, and you get a really shitty garbage horror movie. With the combination of licensing deals and original designs, Pez climbed to the status of pop culture icon. In 1973, Pez built a candy factory and warehouse in Orange, Connecticut to better reach American customers. The factory now manufactures all Pez candy for the US and Canada, about 12 million tablets per day, 5 days per week. And as of 2011, the campus includes a visitor center where anyone can see the largest Pez dispenser and learn how Pez candies are made. Today, Pez head designs are sketched out by artists at Pez or by whoever holds the license for the character. A sculptor creates a 3D mock-up of the head, And then when the design is approved, the artist's prototype is used to create the machinery for injection molding. Dispensers are manufactured in Hungary, China, and Vietnam. Quote, there will be a tremendous amount of work in terms of concept design, prototyping, casting, and it'll be a global production. There's really a huge amount of work that goes into the most pedestrian of products. A Pez container is about as pedestrian as you can get, end quote. That's not nice, but whatever. This Pez Center in Orange, Connecticut is really cool. Like, they have, a Pez museum there. And I was looking it up and realized it's only like 4.5 hours away from my house. And I was like, that would be a fun sort of day trip. Go up for the day, leave the next day, spend the night, but hit that up. And, there's stuff around there. It's in Connecticut. It's probably pretty in the fall. But it looks really cool. And there's tons of old Pez to look at. I don't know. It's something really weird and quaint that was kind of pulling to me the other night. And I was like, that sounds like a fun little trip. Haas III died in 1986, leaving behind a candy empire. A few years later, Pez dispensers were modified to include feet at the base to help the dispensers stand when on display, which is fucking wild. Like, it's not for anything but just to display them because ding-dongs like me would keep them around. The presence or lack of feet now demarcates modern versus vintage dispensers for collectors who held their first Pez convention in Ohio in 1991. Ohio Pez conventions have continued annually ever since, except for 2020 when we had COVID. And more conventions have popped up around the world, allowing collectors to celebrate their shared hobby, showing off their most coveted items and sell their spares. Dispensers can now sell for anywhere from a few dollars to several $100s or even thousands of dollars. One of the rarest Pez designs, a political donkey from 1961, sold for $12,500 in 2013. And a pair of the political dispensers, a donkey and an elephant, sold together for $20,000 the same year. Dispensers with fruit head shapes from the 1970s can also fetch a high price. The pears go from $500 to $1,000, and the pineapples to $3,000. You can still find the original full-bodied Santa dispensers, which weirdly enough you can just get for a little bit over $100 on eBay. Pez has designed about 1,400 different character heads and counting. A few have made their way to the National Museum of American History, including a set of Muppet dispensers with Kermit the Frog, Gonzo, Fozzie Bear, and Miss Piggy. A collector might point out that the earliest Miss Piggy dispensers had fabulous swooping eyelashes, but the Smithsonian's only has straight eyeliner, marking it as a simplified design from a later manufacturing run. Nerd alert. I mean, everybody, sure. I would do the same thing if I knew it. I'd be like, that's not the right one. The original one has the swooping eyelashes. This year, Pez released, well, not this year, but a couple years ago, Pez released a Marilyn Monroe design, a Wawa truck dispenser, and a Star Wars dispenser of Baby Yoda. So collectors strive to have one example of everything produced. A much different mindset from the museum's goal to pick specific iconic objects. Pez is nearly 100 years old, which speaks to its real historic significance. Successful marketing. And that's true. Like, they've marketed themselves really well. And, Pez has tried to keep as much up to date as they can. And they're coming up on, their big, on 100. So, like, if you go to their website, you can get all kind of, like, they got Hello Kitty, they got generic ones, they've got, taco head ones, still the Mandalorian baby, they got like weird bear heads, they've got Minecraft dispensers, they've got like Christmas ornament head ones that are wild, and then there's the Santa, there's Pokemon. The fucking crazy thing is you can get giant refill boxes that contain 100 rolls of Pez for $15. Like, I always forget how cheap Pez is. You know, like when if you just buy it in bulk, like 100 of them for $15 is fucking crazy. But yeah, you know, they have the Disney and the Barbie and the Care Bears, and they have, you know, Superman and Batman and Harry Potter and How to Train Your Dragon and Looney Tunes, Marvel, all that kind of stuff. Even like Cat Noir, if anybody knows that cartoon, which I've seen. My son used to watch it. But yeah, they've got a bunch of like really cool, you know, branded things, Super Mario Brothers and stuff. But they have their own in-house, you know, little quaint, really cool, just generic guys. And the generic guys I really enjoy because they just feel a little bit more innocent and sincere. So yeah, let me talk to you about some of the weirder things of Pez. So some of the Pez stuff, some of their flavors are pretty wild. So Pez is available in 90 countries all over the world. And available flavors differ from country to country. In the United States, Pez flavors come in the usual fruity suspects: orange, strawberry, raspberry, cherry, mango, and lemon. There's also a couple like blueberry and stuff like that. There's also a cola flavor, a peppermint sugar-free variety, and a fizzy version that's reminiscent of Pop Rocks. I've never seen that, but I want it. There's a sour one, the tangy blueberry, green apple, lime. Vegans can enjoy Pez, by the way. There's no animal products whatsoever. However, the Pez menu hasn't always been so conventional. There used to be licorice and coffee options. Pez also once had a chlorophyll flavored version in the 60s. Chlorophyll, more like borophyll. For fans who are interested in what plants tasted like without ever wanting to eat the actual plant, that has to be fucking bizarre tasting. So if you must simply try plant Pez, a rare vintage package of chlorophyll Pez can be yours on eBay. I'm sure they sell them for $145. Eat at your own risk. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine it's bad. It's just fucking sugar and the flavoring. It can't taste good though. There's no way it tastes good. Just for the age of it is what I'm saying. There was talk of a Pez movie at one point. You know, because there was the Emoji movie, the Angry Birds movie, and the Lego movie. So like all this IP was coming up, and I guess they thought Pez was ready to go, and they've been touting it forever, but it's not. Nothing's come up, so who knows? There's been like what do you call them, like, documentaries about Pez obsessives and stuff, but no real Pez movie yet, which I'm kind of fine with. The one factory is still the big guy that makes most of the Pez and the flavors in the world, and that place in Orange, Connecticut, seems like a really fun place to go. It gets a lot of people. 75,000 people every year for a Pez factory seems pretty cool. There used to be one in Burlingame, California, and I was looking into this last week, just like doing the research, and they had what they considered the biggest collection of Pez in the world. But when I looked at it, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. And then I was looking at their website, and it looked like it was from 1994. And then I found out they went under. But it looked really kind of janky, and they had like the Pez that you're not allowed to see, because apparently people make their own Pez illegally and sell it. And apparently years ago there was a really big, this is fucked up, a really, like, someone manufactured a bunch of Hitler Pez that was unauthorized. Like, Pez didn't, fucking make them their own. But somebody made all these Hitler Pez dispensers, which is fucking bizarre, man. And Pez rightfully went after them and fucking destroyed as many as they could find. But this museum in California had one of them. They have like a, illegal candy section, which is probably one of the reasons why they went under. One of the world's rarest Pez dispensers is a 1982 World's Fair astronaut Pez dispenser. And it's really cool. It's blue. It's got a helmet. It's got dude's face. He definitely looks dead in it. But it's pretty cool. And that's the rarest one. They say, but it's not the most expensive one. The world's most expensive fucking Pez container. Oh, no. The guy, the astronaut head is the most expensive one. Sold for $32,000. Which is crazy. Like, you are a maniac. But if you're a completist and you got the money, yeah, sure. This is the one that I was talking about earlier. There was a pair of dispensers featuring the likeness of Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge, Kate Middleton. They were sold for an auction in 2011, and the highest bidder paid $13,360. I think that was the only one ever made. So yeah, it's fucking crazy. And yeah, there's also a Prince Harry and Meghan Markle one that sold for $9,860. The political elephant for 10. The space gun goes for like 12,000. I did see one in an auction this week, and it was only a couple $100, but they weren't. It's not tested, so they don't know if it's actually it shoots. They don't know. And there's no box, which God, who cares, right? So yeah, there you go. Pez. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you love it. If you want to tell me about your greatest Pez dispenser, or, send me a photo, or just talk about it, I'm on Blue Sky at Rude Podcast as well. You can come and join us on the Facebook group and share your experience with Pez, or show off your most beloved Pez. And if you're already part of the Facebook group, you're, welcome to share it as well. I might try to dig one out and take a picture of it and show it up. So yeah, join the Facebook group. It's a lot of fun. So thank you for listening to the Rude Cooking School podcast. I really appreciate it. We don't advertise, so word of mouth is really helpful. It gets around. I'm looking at you, Iceland. I see that people in Iceland are listening more and more, and that's really cool. Seeing you, Germany, seeing you, Australia, and seeing you, England, as always. America, you're number one, always. So tell everybody you can. Anybody who likes food, or likes food history, or likes cooking, or likes food news, like the episode we'll probably do in a week or two. Yeah, tell them about it, and we will see you then. All right, everybody, for the Rude Cooking School podcast. Good God, I can't talk. Getting over a cold. Sorry. I'm John Hauser III. Don't yuck my yum. See you next week, and peace.